I watched in horror as the designer handbag struck my face with a sickening thud. Blood dripped onto the pristine white hospital floor as 200 people in the charity gala froze in stunned silence. But what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about compassion, privilege, and the power of a single moment from the past. This is my story. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I'm what most people would call ordinary. I work as a night shift janitor at St. Catherine's Medical Center, one of the most prestigious hospitals in the city. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and helps me take care of my 8-year-old son Diego. Every night I walk these halls with my cleaning cart, invisible to the doctors, nurses, and patients who barely notice I exist. I've been doing this job for 5 years now, ever since Diego's father left us, and I've learned to find dignity in honest work, even when others don't see it that way. St. Catherine's isn't just any hospital. It's where the city's elite come for their medical needs, where million-dollar donations flow like water, and where the wealthy gather for charity galas that raise more money in one evening than most people see in a lifetime. The building itself is a testament to luxury, with marble floors that I mop every night, crystal chandeliers that I dust weekly, and artwork worth more than my yearly salary hanging on every wall. That Tuesday night started like any other. I clocked in at 11 p.m., grabbed my supplies, and began my rounds. The hospital was quieter than usual, with most patients settled in for the night and only essential staff on duty. I was cleaning the main lobby when I noticed the preparations beginning for something big. Workers were setting up elegant tables, arranging flowers that probably cost more than I made in a week, and testing sound equipment for what looked like a major event. "Excuse me," I said to one of the event coordinators, a harried-looking woman with a clipboard. "Is there something special happening here tomorrow?" She barely glanced at me, clearly seeing my janitor's uniform and dismissing me as unimportant. "The annual Healing Hearts Charity Gala," she said curtly. "The biggest medical fundraiser of the year. We're expecting over 200 of the city's most influential people." I nodded and went back to my work, but I couldn't help feeling a flutter of excitement. In all my years working here, I'd never seen the hospital transformed like this. The lobby was being turned into something magical, with soft lighting, elegant decorations, and an atmosphere of sophistication I'd only seen in movies. Over the next few days, I watched the preparations intensify. Caterers brought in food that smelled like heaven. Florists created arrangements that belonged in a palace, and the hospital's administrative staff buzzed with nervous energy. The gala was being hosted by Dr. Jonathan Westbrook, one of the hospital's most prominent surgeons, and his wife, Victoria. Everyone spoke about them in hushed, reverent tones, as if they were royalty. Dr. Westbrook was known throughout the medical community as a brilliant surgeon, but more than that, he was wealthy beyond imagination. His family had old money, the kind that came with trust funds and country club memberships passed down through generations. His wife, Victoria, was equally impressive on paper, a socialite who served on multiple charity boards and was photographed regularly at high society events. Together, they were the kind of power couple that graced magazine covers and commanded respect wherever they went. The night before the gala, I was cleaning the executive conference room when I overheard Dr. Westbrook talking to the hospital's chief administrator about the event's importance. "This gala isn't just about raising money," he was saying. "It's about maintaining our reputation as the premier medical institution in the city. We need everything to be perfect." As I quietly emptied the trash cans, I felt a mix of admiration and distance. These were people who lived in a world I could barely imagine, where charity galas raised millions of dollars, and social status mattered as much as medical credentials. I was just the woman who cleaned up after them, invisible and insignificant in their grand schemes. That's when fate decided to intervene in the most unexpected way. The morning of the gala, I received a phone call that changed everything. It was Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who usually babysat Diego during my work shifts. Her voice was weak and shaky over the phone. "Elena, dear, I'm so sorry, but I'm in the emergency room. I fell this morning and hurt my hip. I won't be able to watch Diego tonight." My heart sank. I couldn't afford to miss work, especially not on such an important night for the hospital. Single parents know this dilemma well. The impossible choice between responsibilities that all seem equally crucial. After calling every babysitter I knew and coming up empty, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life forever. I decided to bring Diego with me to work. I know it sounds crazy now, but at the time, it seemed like the only option. Diego was a good kid, quiet and well-behaved. I figured I could set him up in the small break room with his homework and some books, and he could sleep on the couch when he got tired. The night shift was usually slow, and I'd done stranger things to make ends meet as a single mother. When I arrived at the hospital that evening with Diego in tow, the transformation was complete. The lobby looked like something out of a fairy tale, with soft golden lighting, elegant table settings, and an atmosphere of refined luxury I'd never experienced before. Guests were already beginning to arrive, men in expensive suits, and women in designer gowns that probably cost more than my car. I quickly got Diego settled in the break room with strict instructions to stay put and be quiet. "Mama has to work tonight, mijo," I told him, using the Spanish endearment that always made him smile. There are very important people here, so we need to be extra careful and respectful. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Diego nodded solemnly, understanding the gravity of the situation better than most 8-year-olds would. He'd grown up watching his mother work hard and treat everyone with respect, regardless of their station in life. He settled in with his coloring books and a sandwich I'd packed, promising to be good. For the first few hours, everything went according to plan. I cleaned the areas away from the gala, staying invisible as always while the wealthy guests enjoy their evening of philanthropy and socializing. The sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and elegant conversation drifted through the halls, creating a soundtrack of privilege that felt both enchanting and distant. Around 10 p.m., disaster struck in the way that disasters always do for people like me, suddenly and without warning. Diego had fallen asleep on the break room couch, and I was finishing up the third-floor patient rooms when I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. The fire alarm was going off, and not just the gentle beep that meant a false alarm, but the urgent, piercing wail that meant real danger. I dropped my mop and ran toward the break room, my heart hammering with panic. The hallways were filling with people, staff members and gala guests alike, all heading toward the exits in an orderly but urgent evacuation. Emergency lights bathed everything in an eerie red glow, and the sound of the alarm made it impossible to think clearly. When I reached the break room, Diego was awake and scared, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Mama, what's happening?" he asked, his small voice barely audible over the alarm. "It's okay, baby," I said, scooping him up in my arms. "We just need to leave the building right now." We joined the stream of people heading toward the main exit, Diego clinging to me while I tried to project calm I didn't feel. In situations like this, all the social barriers disappear temporarily. Rich and poor, important and invisible, everyone becomes equal in the face of potential danger. The evacuation went smoothly, and within minutes, everyone was safely gathered in the hospital's front parking lot. Fire trucks were already arriving, their sirens adding to the chaos, while firefighters rushed into the building to investigate the source of the alarm. The gala guests stood in elegant clusters, women wrapping their designer shawls around their shoulders against the cool night air, while men spoke in low, concerned voices about the inconvenience. That's when I saw her for the first time, really saw her. Victoria Westbrook stood near the front entrance, looking like she'd stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine even in the midst of an emergency evacuation. Her silver gown caught the light from the fire trucks, and her perfectly styled blonde hair didn't have a strand out of place. She was surrounded by other wealthy women, all of them looking more concerned about their interrupted evening than any potential danger. I was standing off to the side, holding Diego and trying to stay out of the way, when the fire chief emerged from the building with good news. It had been a false alarm, triggered by a malfunctioning sensor in the kitchen area. Everyone could return to the building safely. The relief was palpable as people began filing back inside. The gala organizers immediately went into damage control mode, working to get the evening back on track as quickly as possible. I waited until most of the guests had gone back inside before attempting to return with Diego, hoping to slip back to the break room unnoticed. That's when everything went wrong. As I was walking back toward the employee entrance, Diego's small hand in mine, I heard a sharp voice behind me. Excuse me, excuse me. I turned to see Victoria Westbrook approaching, her face a mask of barely controlled anger. Even up close, she was strikingly beautiful, but there was something cold in her eyes that made me instinctively step back. "Are you an employee here?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the night air like a blade. "Yes, ma'am," I replied politely. "I work the night cleaning shift." Her gaze moved to Diego, who was pressed against my side, intimidated by her commanding presence. "And this child? What is he doing here?" I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment, but I kept my voice steady. "This is my son, Diego. My babysitter had an emergency, and I couldn't find anyone else to watch him tonight. I brought him to work with me." Victoria's expression shifted from anger to disgust, as if I'd just confessed to committing a crime. "You brought a child to the hospital?" "During our most important fundraising event of the year." "He's been in the break room all evening," I said quickly, trying to explain. "He hasn't bothered anyone. I made sure he stayed out of the way." But Victoria wasn't listening to my explanations. She was looking at Diego and me like we were contaminating her perfect world just by existing in it. "This is completely unacceptable," she said, her voice rising. "Do you have any idea how inappropriate this is? How unprofessional?" Other people were starting to notice our conversation. Guests who had been heading back into the building were slowing down, curious about the commotion. I could feel their eyes on us, and my face burned with shame. "I'm very sorry," I said, trying to keep my voice calm for Diego's sake. "It won't happen again. I was just trying to get back to work." "Get back to work?" Victoria's laugh was sharp and mocking. "After this display of complete irresponsibility? I don't think so." She turned to address the growing crowd of onlookers, and I realized with growing horror that she was about to make an example of me in front of all these important people. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the parking lot, "I want you all to see what we're dealing with here. This woman, who is supposed to be maintaining the cleanliness and professionalism of our hospital, has brought her child to work during our most important charity event of the year." The crowd was fully focused on us now, their elegant faces turned in our direction like spectators at a show. I wanted to disappear, to take Diego and run away from their judgmental stares, but I was frozen in place by the magnitude of the humiliation. "This is exactly the kind of behavior that reflects poorly on all of us," Victoria continued, warming to her theme. "When we employ people who don't understand boundaries, who think the rules don't apply to them, it diminishes the reputation we've worked so hard to build." Diego was looking up at me with confusion and fear, not understanding why this beautiful woman was saying such harsh things about his mother. I put my hand on his shoulder, trying to comfort him while my own world crumbled around me. "Ma'am," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "please, he's just a child. I was only trying to do my job and take care of my son." Victoria stepped closer, her eyes flashing with an anger that seemed far out of proportion to the situation. "Your job? Your job is to be invisible, to clean up after your betters without causing disruptions or drawing attention to yourself. But instead, you've turned our charity gala into a circus." The words hit me like physical blows. I thought about all the nights I'd spent cleaning these halls, taking pride in my work, even when nobody noticed. I thought about Diego waiting for me at home, proud of his mother who worked hard to provide for him. I thought about the dignity I'd tried to maintain, despite the challenges of being a single parent with limited options. "I understand you're upset," I said, finding my voice again. "But I work hard here, I do my job well, and I treat everyone with respect. I'm not asking for special treatment, just understanding." Victoria's face flushed red with fury. "Understanding? You want understanding? Let me help you understand something. There are people in this world who belong in places like this." She gestured toward the elegant hospital behind us. "And people who don't. People who understand class and propriety. And people who think they can just drag their personal problems into our professional environment." Quote. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word of this public humiliation. Some looked uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up. They were all part of Victoria's world, and I was clearly the outsider. "I may not have money," I said, my voice growing stronger despite my fear, "but I have dignity. I work honestly to support my son, and I'm not ashamed of that." That's when Victoria crossed the line that would change everything. "Dignity?" she sneered. Is that what you call this pathetic display? Dragging your child around like some kind of prop, disrupting our event, embarrassing yourself and everyone associated with this hospital? She reached into her designer purse and pulled out her wallet, extracting a handful of bills. "Here's what I think of your dignity," she said, throwing the money at my feet. "Take your charity case and get out of here before you cause any more damage." The bills scattered on the asphalt around my feet like fallen leaves, and the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone watching. Diego looked down at the money, then up at his mother's face, trying to understand why this woman was being so cruel. I stared at the money on the ground, then back at Victoria's triumphant face. In that moment, something inside me crystallized. I wasn't going to pick up that money. I wasn't going to accept her attempt to reduce me to a beggar in front of all these people. "I don't want your money," I said quietly, but clearly enough for everyone to hear, "and I don't need your charity. What I need is for you to treat me like the human being I am." Victoria's eyes widened with shock and rage. In her world, people like me were supposed to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention or money she threw our way. The idea that I would refuse her gesture and stand up for myself was clearly inconceivable to her. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she hissed, taking a step closer. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who my husband is?" "I know you're someone who thinks money gives you the right to humiliate working people," I replied, my fear finally giving way to anger. "I know you're someone who would embarrass a single mother in front of her child just to make yourself feel superior." The crowd was shifting uncomfortably now. Even in their privileged world, there were limits to what was considered acceptable behavior, and Victoria was approaching those limits rapidly. But she wasn't done yet. In her fury at being challenged by someone she considered beneath her, Victoria made the decision that would ultimately destroy her perfect evening and change both our lives forever. She raised her expensive designer handbag high above her head, her face twisted with rage and humiliation, and brought it down toward my face with all the force she could muster. The bag connected with my cheek with a sickening thud that echoed across the parking lot. The impact sent me stumbling backward, stars exploding across my vision as pain radiated through my skull. I tasted blood where my teeth had cut my lip, and I felt something warm trickling down my cheek. Diego screamed, a sound of pure terror and confusion that cut through the night air like a knife. He threw his small arms around my legs, trying to protect me from this woman who had just attacked his mother in front of 200 witnesses. The silence that followed was deafening. 200 of the city's most important people stood frozen, watching as blood dripped from my face onto the pristine hospital parking lot. Some looked shocked, others looked satisfied, as if justice had finally been served. Victoria stood over me, breathing hard, her designer bag still clutched in her manicured hand. "Maybe now you'll remember your place," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the stunned crowd. I wanted to run. I wanted to take Diego and disappear from this nightmare, to find somewhere safe where cruel people couldn't hurt us anymore. But then, through the ringing in my ears and the pain radiating through my face, I heard a voice that would change everything. What the hell is going on here? The voice was deep, authoritative, and absolutely furious. It cut through the silence like thunder, and I saw Victoria's triumphant expression falter for the first time since this nightmare began. The voice belonged to a man I'd never seen before, tall and imposing, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that blazed with controlled fury. He was wearing an expensive suit, but unlike the other wealthy guests, there was something different about him. Something that commanded immediate attention and respect. Victoria spun around, her face going pale as she recognized the newcomer. "Mr. Harrison," she stammered, "I was just dealing with a situation involving one of the staff members who you just physically assaulted in front of 200 witnesses," the man interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "What I want to know is why, Mr. Harrison." The name sent a ripple through the crowd, and I could see recognition dawning on faces around me. This was Richard Harrison, the billionaire philanthropist who had donated more money to medical causes than anyone else in the country. He wasn't just wealthy. He was legendary, known for building hospitals, funding research, and changing lives on a scale that most people couldn't even comprehend. "It's not what it looks like," Victoria said quickly, her earlier confidence evaporating. "This woman brought her child to work during our gala. She was completely unprofessional and disrespectful when I tried to address the situation appropriately." Harrison's gaze moved from Victoria to me, taking in my bloodied face and Diego clinging to my legs in terror. When his eyes met mine, I saw something unexpected there. Not pity or disgust, but recognition, as if he was seeing something familiar in my situation. "And your response to unprofessionalism was to strike her with your handbag?" Harrison asked, his voice carrying easily across the parking lot. "In front of her child and 200 other people?" "She was being insubordinate," Victoria said defensively. "She refused to accept responsibility for her actions and actually had the audacity to lecture me about respect." Harrison stepped closer to Victoria, and despite his calm demeanor, there was something intimidating about his presence. "Tell me, Mrs. Westbrook, what exactly did this woman do that warranted physical violence?" Victoria looked around desperately, seeking support from the crowd, but found only uncomfortable faces staring back at her. "She brought her child to the hospital during a professional event. She disrupted our gala. She spoke to me in a completely inappropriate manner when I tried to correct her behavior." "So let me understand this correctly," Harrison said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "A single mother, faced with a child care emergency, brought her child to work rather than abandon her responsibilities. When you publicly humiliated her for this, she defended her dignity with words, and your response was to assault her." "I wouldn't call it assault," Victoria said weakly. "What would you call striking someone with an object in front of witnesses?" Harrison asked. "Because I'm fairly certain that's the legal definition." I was still standing there with blood dripping from my face, trying to process what was happening. Diego was pressed against me, his small body trembling with fear and confusion. This powerful man was defending us, but I couldn't understand why. In my experience, wealthy people stuck together, especially against working-class people like me. Harrison turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed something that should disturb every one of us. You've seen someone in a position of privilege use that privilege to humiliate and physically attack someone who has no power to defend herself." The crowd was shifting uncomfortably now. These were people accustomed to being on the right side of every situation, the charitable donors and community leaders who saw themselves as the good guys in every story. Being forced to confront their own complicity in what had just happened was clearly uncomfortable. "This woman," Harrison continued, gesturing toward me, "was trying to balance her responsibilities as a mother with her duties as an employee. She made a difficult choice in a difficult situation, the kind of choice that single parents make every day. And instead of compassion or understanding, she was met with cruelty and violence." Victoria's face was growing redder by the minute. "Mr. Harrison, surely you understand that we have standards to maintain. We can't have people bringing their personal problems into professional environments, especially during important events like this." Harrison's laugh was cold and mirthless. "Standards? Is striking employees part of your standards, Mrs. Westbrook?" "She's not even a real employee," Victoria said desperately. "She's just cleaning staff. She should know her place." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and I saw several people in the crowd actually step back in shock. Even in their privileged world, there were things you simply didn't say out loud, and Victoria had just crossed that line spectacularly. Harrison's expression darkened further. "Just cleaning staff? Let me tell you something about just cleaning staff, Mrs. Westbrook. Without people like her, this hospital would shut down in a week. She probably works harder in one night than you do in a month. And she does it with dignity and professionalism that you clearly lack." He turned to me, his expression softening slightly. "What's your name?" "Elena Rodriguez," I managed to say, my voice still shaky from shock and pain. "Elena Rodriguez," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "How long have you worked here?" 5 years, sir. 5 years of night shifts, cleaning up after everyone else, making sure this place is spotless for the next day. 5 years of honest work that people like Mrs. Westbrook here take for granted until it suits them to use it as ammunition for their cruelty." I could see Dr. Westbrook pushing through the crowd, his face a mask of concern and embarrassment. He reached his wife's side just as Harrison was building towards something that felt like a reckoning. "Victoria, what have you done?" Dr. Westbrook said quietly, taking in the scene before him. "Jonathan," Victoria said, relief flooding her voice, "thank goodness you're here." This woman was completely out of line, and I was forced to take action when she became aggressive and disrespectful. Dr. Westbrook looked from his wife to me, taking in my bloodied face and terrified son. Whatever story Victoria had been preparing to tell him was clearly falling apart in the face of the physical evidence. "You hit her," he said, his voice flat with disbelief. "I defended myself when she became threatening," Victoria insisted. Harrison stepped forward again. "Dr. Westbrook, your wife physically assaulted this woman with her handbag in front of 200 witnesses because she dared to defend her dignity when publicly humiliated. There was no threat, no aggression, nothing that could possibly justify violence." Dr. Westbrook was staring at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "Victoria, tell me you didn't actually hit this woman." "She was being completely inappropriate," Victoria said, but her voice was losing its conviction. "She refused to accept her place. She spoke back to me. She embarrassed us in front of everyone." "So you hit her," Dr. Westbrook said again, his voice hollow. Harrison was watching this exchange with intense interest, and I got the sense that he was evaluating not just Victoria, but Dr. Westbrook as well, testing to see how he would respond to this revelation about his wife's character. "Elena," Harrison said, turning back to me, "do you need medical attention?" I touched my cheek gingerly, feeling the swelling that was already beginning. "I think I'm okay. It's just a cut." "Diego," Harrison said, crouching down to my son's eye level. "That's a strong name for a strong boy. Are you taking good care of your mama?" Quote. Diego nodded solemnly, still pressed against my side but no longer trembling quite as much. There was something about Harrison's presence that was reassuring, despite the chaos of the situation. "Good," Harrison said, standing back up. "Because she's lucky to have you, and you're lucky to have a mother who works so hard to take care of you." Victoria was growing more desperate by the minute. "Mr. Harrison, surely you can understand that we have certain expectations for our employees. We can't have them bringing their children to work, disrupting our events, showing disrespect to their betters." Harrison's eyes flashed dangerously. "Their betters? Is that really how you see yourself, Mrs. Westbrook, as Elena's better?" "Well, obviously," Victoria said, as if the answer should be apparent to everyone. "I mean, look at our respective positions in life. Look at what we've accomplished versus what she has." "What have you accomplished?" Harrison asked quietly. Victoria blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "I beg your pardon?" "I asked what you've accomplished. What have you built? What have you created? What problems have you solved? What lives have you improved?" Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I serve on several charity boards. I organize fundraising events. I'm married to one of the city's most prominent surgeons." "So you spend other people's money on causes chosen by committees, throw parties to ask for more money, and you married well," Harrison summarized. "Anything else?" The crowd was watching this exchange with fascination now. Victoria Westbrook, who had seemed so powerful and intimidating just minutes earlier, was being systematically dismantled by someone who actually understood power. "Elena," Harrison continued, "works every night to keep this hospital running smoothly. She raises a son as a single mother. She showed up to work tonight despite a childcare emergency because she understood her responsibilities. When publicly humiliated, she maintained her dignity and stood up for herself. Which one of you sounds more accomplished to you?" Victoria's face was cycling through various shades of red and purple. "You can't be serious. She's a janitor. I'm a Westbrook." "And I'm a Harrison," Harrison said quietly. "But 15 years ago, I was homeless." A collective gasp went up from the crowd. This was clearly not part of Richard Harrison's public story, and the revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled guests. 15 years ago, Harrison continued, his voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. "I was sleeping in my car, showering at truck stops, and trying to figure out how I was going to eat my next meal. I'd lost everything in a business deal gone wrong, and I was too proud to ask for help from family or friends." I was staring at him in amazement. This man, who was worth billions, who commanded respect from world leaders and business titans, had once been where I was now, struggling to survive and maintain dignity in the face of impossible circumstances. "One night," Harrison continued, "I was parked outside this very hospital. I'd been feeling sick for days, but I couldn't afford to see a doctor. I was sitting in my car, trying to decide whether to swallow my pride and go to the emergency room, when someone knocked on my window." The crowd was riveted now, hanging on every word of this unexpected confession. It was a young woman in hospital scrubs. She was getting off her shift, and she'd noticed me sitting there for the past few nights. She asked if I was okay, if I needed help. When I tried to brush her off, She insisted on buying me dinner from the hospital cafeteria. My heart was beginning to race as pieces of a puzzle started falling into place in my mind. She didn't just buy me food, Harrison said, his eyes finding mine across the crowd. She sat with me while I ate it. She listened to my story without judgment. She told me that everyone deserves a chance to get back on their feet, and she gave me money for a hotel room for the night. The memory hit me like a physical blow. 15 years ago, working the night shift at St. Catherine's as a nurse's aide while going to school during the day. A man in an old car in the parking lot, looking lost and broken. The conversation we'd had over terrible cafeteria coffee. His story of business failure and lost hope. She gave me something more valuable than money that night, Harrison continued. She gave me hope. She reminded me that kindness still existed in the world, that not everyone would judge me for my failures. She helped me remember who I was underneath the shame and despair. I was crying now, tears mixing with the blood on my cheek as the full magnitude of the moment hit me. The young man I had helped all those years ago had become one of the most successful businessmen in the world. I never forgot her name, Harrison said, his voice thick with emotion. Elena Rodriguez. I never forgot her kindness, and I never stopped looking for a way to thank her. Victoria was staring back and forth between Harrison and me, her face a mask of horror as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. "You're telling me," she said weakly, "that she's the one who saved my life," Harrison finished. "The one whose compassion and generosity gave me the strength to rebuild everything I'd lost. The one who taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in how we treat each other." Dr. Westbrook was staring at his wife with undisguised disgust. "Victoria, do you understand what you've done? Do you comprehend the level of cruelty you've just displayed?" "I didn't know," Victoria said desperately. "How could I have known?" "You shouldn't have had to know," Harrison said firmly. "Every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their job title or bank account balance. The fact that you think Elena's worth depends on her usefulness to me proves that you've learned nothing from tonight." The crowd was beginning to murmur among themselves, the shocking turn of events providing enough gossip material for months of social gatherings. But I barely heard them. I was focused on Harrison, on the impossible coincidence that had brought us back together at this moment. "Elena," Harrison said, approaching me carefully, "I'm so sorry this happened to you. No one deserves to be treated the way Mrs. Westbrook treated you tonight." "I can't believe it's really you," I whispered. "After all these years." "I've thought about you often," he said. "I've wondered what happened to the angel who helped a stranger in his darkest hour. I never imagined I'd find you here, in circumstances like these." Diego was looking up at both of us with wide eyes, trying to understand the adult conversation swirling around him. "Mama," he said quietly, "is this the nice man you told me about? The one you helped a long time ago?" I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. I had told Diego the story many times, using it as an example of why we should always try to help others when we can, even when we don't have much ourselves. Harrison knelt down again, bringing himself to Diego's eye level. "Your mama is the kindest person I've ever met," he said seriously. "She helped me when I had nothing, and she asked for nothing in return. That's the kind of person you should be proud to call your mother." Diego nodded solemnly, his earlier fear forgotten in the face of this gentle giant who spoke about his mama with such reverence. Victoria made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Mr. Harrison, surely you understand that, regardless of your history with this woman, there are still standards and protocols that must be maintained. Her behavior tonight was still inappropriate." Harrison stood slowly, his expression hardening as he turned to face Victoria. "Her behavior? Let's talk about behavior, Mrs. Westbrook. Elena brought her son to work because she had no other option and didn't want to abandon her responsibilities. When you humiliated her publicly, she defended herself with dignity and grace. When you threw money at her feet like she was a beggar, she refused to pick it up because she has pride." He stepped closer to Victoria, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried across the entire parking lot. "And when you physically assaulted her in front of her terrified child, she didn't retaliate or escalate the situation. She stood there and took it because she's a better person than you'll ever be." The silence that followed was deafening. 200 of the city's most influential people stood frozen, witnessing the complete destruction of Victoria Westbrook's social standing in real time. "Now," Harrison continued, his voice returning to normal volume. "Let's talk about consequences. Dr. Westbrook, I believe your wife owes Elena an apology. A sincere one." Dr. Westbrook looked at his wife with an expression that mixed embarrassment, anger, and disappointment. "Victoria," he said quietly, "apologize to this woman immediately." Victoria looked around desperately, seeking an escape route that didn't exist. Every face in the crowd was turned toward her, waiting to see how she would respond to this moment of reckoning. She began, then stopped, her voice failing her. "I'm waiting," Harrison said patiently. The parking lot had become a stage, and Victoria Westbrook was about to deliver the most important performance of her life. The only question was whether she would choose redemption or complete destruction. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.